The Archero 2 meta looks very different after the latest updates, and if you've been relying on your old favorite skills, it might be time to rethink your choices. New characters like Thor and Demon King Archero have completely changed which skill combinations perform the best, and some abilities that used to be easy picks have dropped down the rankings. So today, we're breaking down every skill in the game and showing you exactly which ones deserve a spot in your build. This tier list has been updated for the latest version 1.1.7 meta, so everything you're about to see reflects the current state of the game. We'll explain why certain skills dominate almost every run, which ones are only good in specific situations, and which ones you should skip whenever possible. And before we jump in, don't forget to check out the Angler's Bounty minigame. It's an easy way to grab some great rewards while it's available. Now, let's get into the tier list. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking skills in Archero 2. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The skills in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Slow Field, Aqua Flighty, Fountain of Life, Lucky Heart, Heart of Vitality, Warrior's Heart, Lightning Meteor Potion, Flame Meteor Potion, Venom Meteor Potion, Strength Blood, Burning Path, Restore HP, Perilous Recovery, Riposte Strike, and Wounded Warrior. You know a skill tier is in trouble when the nicest thing you can say about it is, well, I guess it does something. That's exactly where we are with the D tier skills. Most of these aren't completely unplayable, but compared to everything above them, they either offer almost no value or ask for way too much in return. Let's start with Slow Field. Believe it or not, this skill actually has one tiny niche. Slowing enemy projectiles can occasionally make certain bullet-heavy rooms a little easier to dodge. The problem is that those situations are incredibly rare, and outside of them, the slowing effect barely changes anything. In almost every run, you'll wish you had picked literally anything else. Then we have Aqua Flight, which is unfortunately about as exciting as watching paint dry. It doesn't provide meaningful damage, survivability, or utility, making it one of those skills that simply wastes a valuable upgrade slot. There really isn't much more to say about it. Next up are Fountain of Life, Lucky Heart, and Heart of Vitality. These three all suffer from the exact same problem. They focus on increasing your health points, but health points are one of the weakest stats you can invest in throughout Archero 2. Fountain of Life gives extra maximum health, Heart of Vitality does something very similar, and Lucky Heart adds only a small chance of gaining additional health. Even when Lucky Heart actually activates, the payoff is so tiny that you'll barely notice it. These skills look comforting, but they rarely make your runs any easier. Warrior's Heart sounds like it should be a solid offensive option, but appearances can be deceiving. The chance to gain extra attack power is extremely low, and even when it triggers, the boost is too small to have a meaningful impact on your overall damage. There are dozens of offensive skills that outperform it without relying on luck. Now let's talk about Lightning Meteor Potion and Flame Meteor Potion. Honestly, this isn't really a problem with these two specifically. The entire Meteor Potion family struggles to keep up with stronger damage skills. Their damage output is simply too low, so regardless of whether you're dropping lightning or fire from the sky, enemies are barely going to care. Venom Meteor Potion joins the same unfortunate club. Poison might sound appealing on paper, but just like the other Meteor versions, the damage is disappointingly weak. If you're looking for a real damage increase, Meteor Potions are almost never the answer. Strength Blood might have one of the most misleading names in the game. It sounds powerful, but in reality, it offers one of the weakest stat increases available from any skill. Spending a precious level up on this is almost always a mistake, and it's one of the easiest skips you'll ever make. Burning Path at least tries to do something different by leaving damaging flames behind your character. Unfortunately, those flames deal very little damage, they don't provide any bonus stats, and ranged enemies usually stay far away from them anyway. It ends up being ineffective against exactly the enemies that give players the most trouble. Restore health points isn't technically bad because healing is never completely useless. The issue is that choosing a healing skill usually means giving up a permanent damage or defensive upgrade. In most situations, restoring a bit of health right now is nowhere near as valuable as becoming stronger for the rest of the run. Only grab this if every other option is somehow even worse. Perilous Recovery falls into a similar category. The sustain it provides sounds nice during the selection screen, but once you're actually playing, you'll notice that the healing rarely changes the outcome of difficult fights. Most successful runs depend far more on avoiding damage than slowly recovering from it. Finally, we have Riposte Strike and Wounded Warrior. Riposte Strike is easily the weakest strike skill in Archero 2 because its damage contribution is practically non-existent. Wounded Warrior at least has a theoretical upside. If your build already includes reliable sustain, you can intentionally take occasional hits to activate its bonus. The problem is that any skill encouraging you to get hit in a game built around dodging is already fighting an uphill battle. Most of the time, avoiding damage entirely is still the smarter strategy, which leaves Wounded Warrior sitting comfortably near the bottom of the tier list. The skills in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Super Venom, Venom, Rotating Web, Soul of Strength, Weapon Enchantment, Super Frost, Rapid Fire Meteors, Wall Piercing Arrow, Blitz Strike, Cloud Footed, Short Range Strike, Split Shot, Bomb Sprite, Abundant Potion, Charged Arrow, Demon Slaying Meteor, Flame Sprite, Ice Spike Sprite, Lightning Sprite, Venom Sprite, Fairy's Breath, Vampiric Circle, Warrior's Breath, Demon Recovery, Breath of the Wind, Strike Potion, and Frost Meteor Potion. Some skills don't completely sabotage your run, but they also never make you excited to see them. That's basically what C tier is all about. These skills all have situations where they can work, but most of them need very specific builds or simply get overshadowed by much stronger alternatives. Let's begin with Super Venom and Venom. Venom gives you a respectable source of bonus damage over time, but Poison is already the weakest elemental damage type in the game. Super Venom boosts that poison damage significantly, but it only does anything if you already have a poison source. Even when you combine both skills, they still struggle to compete with stronger elemental setups like Burn or Lightning. They're playable, just not particularly impressive. Rotating Web sounds much cooler than it actually is. The webs can slow down groups of enemies a little, making mob rooms slightly safer, but that's where the positives end. The extra damage is almost non-existent, making this one of the weakest legendary skills available. Right next to it is Soul of Strength, which somehow manages to be even less exciting. It boosts one of the least valuable stats in the game, making it arguably the weakest legendary skill you could ever roll. Weapon Enchantment is another skill that looks fantastic on paper. Being able to keep attacking with your main weapon while moving sounds incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, the penalties attached to the skill are so severe that the trade-off simply isn't worth it. In practice, your overall performance usually gets worse instead of better, leaving this among the weakest epic damage skills. Moving on to Super Frost, Rapid Fire Meteors, and Wall Piercing Arrow. Super Frost adds a burst of damage whenever frozen enemies thaw out, but compared to every other elemental enhancement, it delivers the lowest damage increase. Rapid Fire Meteors doubles your meteor damage, which sounds great until you remember that meteor skills are weak to begin with. Without Meteor Pursuit, this skill does almost nothing. Wall Piercing Arrow can help if your build lacks any piercing attacks, but once you gain Pierce from another skill or directly from your weapon, it instantly becomes a wasted upgrade. Blitz Strike, Cloud Footed, and Short Range Strike all suffer from being far too situational. Blitz Strike technically performs better than the various strike potions, but that isn't saying much because strike builds themselves aren't very competitive. Cloud Footed offers a welcome movement speed increase, although the pushback effect rarely changes the outcome of difficult fights. Short Range Strike can generate respectable bonus damage in knuckle or claw circling orb builds, but it heavily hurts your range damage, making it a terrible choice for almost every other setup. Split Shot, Bomb Sprite, and Abundant Potion each depend heavily on the rest of your build. Split Shot becomes surprisingly effective alongside Tracking Eye or Bouncing Arrow because the additional projectiles gain much more value. Without those synergies, however, it feels weak. Bomb Sprite increases damage nicely if you're committed to a full Sprite build, but Sprites themselves simply aren't among the strongest archetypes. Abundant Potion can greatly improve powerful consumables like Invincibility Potion and Frenzy Potion, but if you never find those potions, this skill contributes almost nothing. Charged Arrow and Demon Slaying Meteor are two more examples of skills that need help from others. Charged Arrow can fit into dedicated charge builds and even provides piercing if you don't already have it. Unfortunately, it slows your attack speed so much that using it alone feels clunky and inefficient. Demon Slaying Meteor performs reasonably well while clearing large groups of enemies, but bosses completely ignore its strengths. Since boss fights are the biggest challenge in Archero 2, that's a major weakness. Now let's talk about the 4 sprite skills. Flame Sprite is easily the strongest among the basic sprite options because burn damage can stack repeatedly and melt bosses over time. Ice Spike. Sprite trades damage for utility, freezing enemies often enough to be genuinely helpful even outside dedicated sprite builds. Lightning Sprite only starts shining in full sprite compositions, while Venom Sprite offers steady poison damage that unfortunately cannot stack like burn. All four are usable, but Sprite builds remain weaker than many other strategies. Fairy's Breath, Warrior's Breath, and Breath of the Wind all provide simple stat boosts. Fairy's Breath increases attack speed, Warrior's Breath boosts overall damage, and Breath of the Wind improves movement speed. None of those bonuses are bad, but they're all too small to compete with stronger fine skills. You'll notice them, but you probably won't remember picking them 10 minutes later. Vampiric Circle and Demon Recovery both focus on survivability, although they do it in very different ways. Vampiric Circle can provide meaningful healing if you're already investing heavily into circle skills, but without those upgrades, the healing feels underwhelming. Demon Recovery exists mainly for players who constantly take damage from regular enemies. The funny thing is that it does absolutely nothing during boss fights, where survival usually matters the most. Finally, we have Strike Potion and Frost Meteor Potion. Strike Potion can squeeze out a little extra damage for dedicated strike builds, but needing to collect potions before it activates makes the entire mechanic unreliable. Frost Meteor Potion is at least interesting because freezing a dangerous boss at the right moment can occasionally save a run. Sadly, its damage is practically non-existent, so despite the utility, it remains a very low priority skill whenever stronger options are available. Overall, C tier is filled with skills that aren't complete disasters, but almost every one of them comes with a catch. Some require specific synergies, others offer bonuses that are simply too small, and several belong to archetypes that just aren't very strong in the current meta. If you end up taking them, your run can still succeed, but you'll usually be hoping for a better upgrade on the very next level. The skills in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Super Meteor, Sprite King, Meteor Pursuit, Enchanted Strike, Sprite Frenzy, Super Lightning, Laser Sprite, Energy Ring, Circling Laser Orb, Giant Strength, Ricocheting Arrow, Sprite Boost, Perilous Fervor, Angelic Shelter, Underworld Warrior, Lucky Band-Aid, Fairy of the Wind, Piercing Arrow, Instant Strike, Pursuit Strike, Thunder Circle, Fire Circle, Venom Circle, Backward Arrow, Frenzy Potion, and Bouncing Arrow. B tier is where things finally start getting interesting. These are skills that can absolutely carry their weight under the right circumstances. The catch is that almost every single one comes with some kind of condition. If your build matches, they're great. If it doesn't, they can feel surprisingly average. Let's start with the Meteor family one last time. Super Meteor offers respectable damage when clearing large groups of enemies, but that's about all it has going for it. There are simply stronger legendary skills competing for the same slot. Meteor Pursuit is actually the strongest Meteor skill in Archero 2 because it makes Meteors much more reliable. The funny part is that even the best Meteor skill only lands in B tier. That should tell you everything you need to know about the overall state of Meteor builds. Moving over to sprites, we have Sprite King, Sprite Frenzy, Laser Sprite, and Sprite Boost. Sprite King provides a solid damage increase to all your sprites, while Sprite Frenzy adds valuable attack power and attack speed if you fully committed to a sprite build. Laser Sprite is probably the most reliable offensive sprite thanks to its strong mob clearing potential and respectable boss damage. Sprite Boost is another straightforward damage increase. The problem with all of them is simple: sprite builds themselves just aren't among the strongest strategies in the current meta. They're good upgrades for sprite players, but they won't suddenly make sprites top tier. Enchanted Strike and Super Lightning are both heavily dependent on synergy. Enchanted Strike becomes incredibly powerful in a complete strike setup, especially if your main weapon inflicts burn, allowing it to deal huge amounts of extra boss damage. Without a proper strike build though, it barely does anything. Super Lightning follows the same pattern. It improves lightning damage and adds useful chain effects for clearing mobs, but lightning remains the weakest offensive element overall, limiting its potential. Energy Ring is one of those skills that doesn't immediately look impressive until you actually play with it. Increasing projectile size makes hitting enemies much easier, especially in crowded rooms. Pair it with other charge skills and it becomes surprisingly powerful. The downside is that the reduced damage makes boss fights slower, so it shines much more during regular stages than during the final encounter. The circle skills begin to look much more appealing in B tier. Circling Laser Orb delivers reliable damage even while you're keeping your distance, making it one of the safer circle options. Thunder Circle provides consistent bonus damage but simply can't compete with stronger circle variants. Fire Circle, on the other hand, is easily the strongest fine circle skill because burn damage stacks over time and absolutely melts bosses. You do have to stay close enough to keep applying it, which isn't always comfortable. Venom Circle also performs well since poison keeps ticking until an enemy dies, but burn stacking mechanic still gives Fire Circle the edge. Giant Strength offers one of the more interesting trade-offs in the game. The offensive stat boosts are genuinely impressive and noticeably increase your damage output. Unfortunately, reducing your movement speed makes dodging much harder, and in Archero 2 surviving usually matters more than squeezing out a little extra damage. Sometimes the biggest enemy isn't the monster, it's your own slow feet. Ricocheting Arrow, Backward Arrow, and Bouncing Arrow all focus on improving projectile coverage. Ricocheting Arrow helps arrows bounce between enemies, making room clearing much smoother, although it contributes almost nothing during boss fights. Backward Arrow can provide respectable extra damage if you're already using Tracking Eye or Bouncing Arrow, but without those synergies, it might as well not exist. Bouncing Arrow itself works nicely with piercing attacks or diagonal projectiles, allowing shots to keep bouncing around the battlefield, but outside those combinations, it feels fairly underwhelming. Risk and reward players may enjoy Perilous Fervor, Angelic Shelter, and Underworld Warrior. Perilous Fervor becomes incredibly effective when your health points are low, making it especially valuable for Helix players who intentionally stay injured for stronger bonuses. Angelic Shelter occasionally saves a run by granting temporary invincibility during overwhelming bullet patterns, although skilled players may rarely need it. Underworld Warrior sacrifices maximum health points in exchange for stronger devil rewards and bonus damage. Sometimes you'll receive amazing devil skills and feel like a genius. Other times you'll wonder why you gave away your health for absolutely nothing. Lucky Band-Aid, Fairy of the Wind, and Piercing Arrow are all reliable utility choices. Lucky Band-Aid increases your luck, helping you find stronger upgrades while also clearing incoming projectiles more often than you'd expect. Fairy of the Wind offers welcome boosts to both attack speed and movement speed, although the bonuses aren't large enough to prioritize over stronger rare skills. Piercing Arrow is fantastic if your weapon lacks any form of piercing, but once you already have Pierce, it instantly loses all value. Strike builds receive a few more useful tools with Instant Strike and Pursuit Strike. Instant Strike provides a consistent damage increase that remains active even while you're moving, making it a dependable option throughout an entire run. Pursuit Strike excels at wiping out groups of enemies, although it contributes almost nothing during boss encounters. Neither one reaches the level of Assault Strike, but they're still perfectly respectable additions to dedicated strike builds. Finally, there's Frenzy Potion, one of the more enjoyable utility skills in B tier. Whenever it activates, the combination of increased attack speed and critical rate gives your damage a noticeable boost. The only downside is that Frenzy Potions don't appear very often during boss fights, and the buff itself doesn't last particularly long. Even so, when everything lines up, you'll definitely feel the difference. Overall, B tier is full of skills that are genuinely good but rarely universal. Most of them either need the right synergies or lose effectiveness depending on the situation. If your build supports them, many of these can perform like A tier skills. Without that support though, they're simply solid choices that get the job done without stealing the spotlight. The skills in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Sacred Protection, Energy Beam, Double Strike Swords, Super Flame, Super Circle, Wind Blessing, Diagonal Arrows, Strike Boost, ATK Increase and Stand Strong, Swift Arrow, Lightwing Arrow, Lucky Cracker, Demon Slayer, Invincibility Potion, Frost, Bolt, Flame, Assault Strike, Bane of Bosses, and Ice Circle. This is where the skill picks start feeling genuinely exciting. A tier is packed with upgrades that can completely change the direction of your run. Some of them fit into almost every build, while others become absolute monsters once you commit to a specific playstyle. If one of these shows up, you'll usually stop for a second before pressing the upgrade button. Let's start with the defensive options. Sacred Protection is one of the strongest survival tools in the game because it can save you exactly when things start getting dangerous. Veteran players with incredible reflexes may not need that extra layer of protection very often, but for everyone else, it can easily prevent a run-ending mistake. Wind Blessing also focuses entirely on staying alive by improving your survivability. It doesn't increase your damage at all, but sometimes surviving long enough to keep attacking is the biggest damage boost you can ask for. Charge builds receive some incredible upgrades with Energy Beam and Lightwing Arrow. Energy Beam can deal absurd amounts of damage once it's combined with other charge skills, turning your attacks into screen-clearing lasers. Lightwing Arrow is equally impressive, greatly increasing both attack size and damage while synergizing perfectly with the rest of the charge package. Neither skill reaches its full potential alone, but together, they can transform an already strong charge build into something ridiculous. If you're playing a strike build, this next group is basically your dream shopping list. Double strike swords practically doubles your strike damage output and easily earns its place as the strongest strike skill in Archero 2. Strike Boost adds another massive 50% damage increase to every strike attack, making each hit significantly stronger. Then there's Assault Strike, the core fine skill that every serious strike build wants as early as possible. Outside dedicated strike setups, these skills lose almost all their value, but inside one, they're absolutely devastating. Burn builds also receive a huge power spike through Flame and Super Flame. Flame is widely considered the strongest elemental attack modifier in the game because burn damage stacks repeatedly, allowing bosses to lose enormous chunks of health over time. The faster your attack speed becomes, the stronger burn gets. Super Flame pushes those burn effects even further, making the combination one of the deadliest boss-killing packages available. Separately, they're good. Together, they're terrifying. Circle builds aren't left behind either. Super Circle provides one of the largest overall damage increases available for Circle users, making every rotating attack much more dangerous. Ice Circle takes a different approach by prioritizing utility instead of raw damage. Continuously freezing enemies around you makes melee weapons like Knuckles and Claws dramatically safer to play. While its damage isn't spectacular, the amount of control it gives you is hard to ignore. Diagonal arrows may not look flashy at first, but adding 2 extra projectiles is a surprisingly massive damage increase. Clearing regular rooms becomes noticeably faster, and once you combine it with Tracking Eye or Bouncing Arrow, even boss fights become much easier. Without those supporting skills though, bosses can still avoid a large portion of the extra arrows, preventing it from reaching its full potential. Sometimes the simplest upgrades are also the most reliable. Attack increase is exactly what it sounds like. More damage regardless of what weapon or build you're using. It doesn't rely on synergies or special mechanics. Sure, specialized epic skills can outperform it inside dedicated builds, but if you're looking for a universally useful upgrade, it's hard to complain about free damage. Stand Strong rewards a completely different playstyle. As long as you maintain distance from enemies, your damage receives a huge boost. Bow, crossbow, and similar ranged weapons absolutely love this skill. The downside appears during intense bullet hell stages where constant movement is required. Knuckle and Claw users also get much less value because they're always forced into close range combat. Swift Arrow quietly becomes one of the strongest offensive upgrades once you understand how attack speed works. Although each projectile deals slightly less damage, the increase in attack speed more than makes up for it. Even better, every effect that activates when you attack also triggers more frequently. The only real downside is the smaller projectile size, which can occasionally make clearing large groups of enemies slightly less convenient. Luck-based utility also gets represented here through Lucky Cracker. Increasing your luck means you'll naturally find stronger skills more often throughout the run, giving this upgrade value that lasts until the very end. The added dodge chance can occasionally save you as well. The only catch is timing. Finding Lucky Cracker early is fantastic. Finding it near the end of a run is much less exciting because most important upgrade choices have already been made. Finally, we have Demon Slayer, Invincibility Potion, Frost, Bolt, and Bane of bosses. Demon Slayer tears through regular enemy waves but loses all usefulness during boss fights. Invincibility Potion remains one of the strongest utility skills in the game because temporary invulnerability can completely erase dangerous situations. Frost is the best elemental modifier if your priority is crowd control rather than damage, keeping enemies frozen and making survival much easier. Bolt adds reliable bonus damage to every projectile and performs well even without super lightning, although Burn still outclasses it. Bane of bosses rounds out the tier by increasing boss damage while also providing healing, making it one of the strongest universally useful find skills you can possibly find. Overall, a tier is packed with skills that you'll almost never regret taking. Some are incredible universal upgrades, while others become absolute powerhouses inside the right build. They're not quite the automatic picks that define the very top of the meta, but if your run is built around them, they'll often feel just as powerful. The skills in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Beam Strike, Corrosive Field, Power Trio, Rapid Fire, Warrior Soul, Soul of Swiftness, Revive, Tracking Eye, Circling Orbs Boost, Front Arrow, and Long Range Power. Now we've reached the skills that can completely take over a run. These are the upgrades that make you smile the moment they appear because you already know your chances of winning just went up. S tier isn't about skills that are merely good. These are the ones that define the current Archero 2 meta. Let's start with Beam Strike, one of the strongest offensive skills in the entire game. It delivers incredible damage without needing any supporting skills to become effective, which already puts it ahead of most other upgrades. On top of that, its laser attacks pierce through enemies, allowing you to damage entire lines of monsters at once. If you're already building around Strike, Beam Strike becomes absolutely ridiculous. The only downside is that its damage eventually gets outscaled if you ignore the rest of the Strike package. Corrosive Field is a completely different monster. If you're playing with Claws, Knuckles, or a Circling Orb setup, this skill feels almost unfair. Staying close to enemies constantly applies huge amounts of damage while letting your other abilities keep working. It's one of those upgrades that completely changes how comfortable melee combat feels. Outside close range builds though, it loses most of its value, so ranged players can safely pass on it. Some skills don't rely on flashy mechanics, they simply make every number on your screen bigger. Power Trio is exactly that kind of upgrade. The collection of stat boosts it provides is excellent from the moment you pick it, and it only becomes stronger as your build grows. Every additional buff you collect throughout the run makes Power Trio even more valuable. It doesn't bring any special utility, but sometimes overwhelming power is all the utility you need. Rapid Fire deserves its reputation as one of the best skills in Archero 2. While it technically reduces your attack speed slightly, the overall damage increase to your main weapon is enormous. The trade-off is heavily in your favor, and almost every weapon benefits from it. Whether you're clearing rooms or burning down bosses, Rapid Fire consistently delivers incredible results. If your goal is pure damage, Warrior's Soul never disappoints. It provides one of the largest raw damage increases available in the game without asking you to build around any specific mechanic. No conditions, no complicated synergies, just more damage. It may not offer crowd control or defensive bonuses, but when enemies disappear faster, you often don't need those things anyway. Soul of Swiftness proves once again why attack speed is one of the strongest stats in Archero 2. Faster attacks naturally increase your damage output, but that's only half the story. The additional movement speed also makes dodging enemy attacks much easier, improving both offense and defense at the same time. It's one of those rare epic skills that feels fantastic in almost every build. Then there's Revive, the skill everyone secretly hopes to see. Sometimes the difference between victory and a defeat is getting one more chance after making a mistake. Revive gives you exactly that. A single extra life can completely rescue an otherwise failed run, making it one of the strongest utility skills in the entire game. Every experienced Archero player has had at least one run that was saved by this skill. Tracking Eye is one of the smartest upgrades in the game because it improves several other skills at the same time. Suddenly, projectile-based upgrades that previously felt mediocre become reliable sources of damage. Homing attacks dramatically improve your consistency against moving enemies and bosses alike. The only exception comes from builds focused on detached weapons or close-range combat, where Tracking Eye naturally has fewer opportunities to shine. For Circling Orb players, Circling Orb's boost is almost an automatic pick. Unlike many synergy-based upgrades, it doesn't require a massive collection of circle skills before becoming useful. Even with only a handful of rotating attacks, the damage increase is immediately noticeable. If your build revolves around Circling Orbs, few upgrades offer a better return. There are some skills that require careful thought before choosing them. Front Arrow is not one of them. Extra projectiles fired directly in front of you translate into one simple thing: more damage. It works with virtually every weapon, every build, and every situation. Whenever Front Arrow appears, it's almost always the correct choice. Few skills are as consistently powerful from the first room all the way to the final boss. Finally, we have Long Range Power, which many players consider the single strongest fine skill in Archero 2. Fighting from a distance already keeps you safer, and this skill rewards that playstyle with an enormous damage increase. Bosses, in particular, melt under its effects because maintaining range is usually much easier during those encounters. Melee-focused builds won't benefit nearly as much, but for almost every ranged weapon, Long Range Power is about as close to a perfect upgrade as you can get. Looking at S tier as a whole, one thing becomes obvious. These skills don't just improve your build, they often define it. Whether it's the unmatched consistency of Front Arrow, the life-saving power of Revive, the incredible scaling of Power Trio, or the devastating damage from Beam Strike and long-range power, every skill here has the potential to carry an entire run. If one of these appears during your upgrade choices, you're usually looking at one of the easiest decisions you'll make all game. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.